Try to imagine walking for a full day with an empty water skin. No tap, no bottle, no filter, and not even the concept that bacteria exist. You need water today, or you start dying today. But one wrong drink might not kill you outright. It might just leave you too weak with vomiting and diarrhea to hunt, to gather, to keep up with your own group. That's how every human lived for nearly 297,000 of the last 300,000 years. And the system they built to solve it, the single most basic problem a body has, was quieter, more resourceful than most people realize. Because water doesn't announce itself as dangerous. A pond can look perfectly clear and still be crawling with parasites. A muddy, uninviting spring can be completely safe. There's no smell you can always trust, no color that guarantees anything. And in a world with no rehydration salts, no antibiotics, no hospital bed waiting for you, getting it wrong could mean days of your body failing you in an environment that offered no room for weakness. So how did people figure out, over and over, generation after generation, which water wouldn't kill them? Let's start with the first tool, and it's the one that did most of the heavy lifting, watching everything that was already surviving there. Long before anyone understood microorganisms, people understood something almost as reliable: which animals drank from which sources, and whether those animals kept coming back healthy. Groups like the San of the Kalahari read the landscape like a report that had already been filed for them. Converging animal trails, fresh droppings, birds circling at dawn, all of it was evidence. A waterhole visited daily by healthy animals was probably safe. A waterhole ringed with bones and no fresh tracks was a warning nature had already written out in full. You didn't need a lab, you needed to notice who was still alive. But watching only tells you where water exists, not what to do when there's none in sight. That's where the second tool came in: hiding water before you needed it. The sand didn't just find water, they buried it, sealing it inside hollowed ostrich eggshells and caching them at marked points across the Kalahari, sometimes months ahead of a journey so that a return trip through brutal, dry terrain wouldn't be a gamble. In parts of Australia, Aboriginal communities dug soakages, shallow pits sunk into dry riverbeds where groundwater collected just beneath the surface, sometimes drawn up through a hollow reed pushed into the sand like a straw. In both cases, the water wasn't sitting there waiting. Someone had already decided, long before you got thirsty, exactly where your next drink would come from. And then there was a third tool, one that came from an entirely different kind of discovery: fire. Once early humans controlled it reliably, they gained a way to make questionable water safer, not through any understanding of microbes, but through pattern recognition. Boiled water was noticed again and again to cause less sickness than water drunk straight from a source people already had doubts about. It wasn't universal, and it wasn't always practical for people constantly on the move, but where it took hold, it was a real technological edge layered on top of everything observation and storage had already taught them. This pattern of watching, hiding, and treating water shows up again and again across small-scale societies on nearly every continent, adapted to wildly different terrain. In the high deserts of coastal Chile and parts of the Andes, some communities strung woven nets across ridgelines to comb drinking water directly out of passing fog, letting droplets condense on the fibers and run down into stone basins, turning air itself into a water source in places where rain almost never fell. In the Arctic, Inuit communities relied on a distinction that sounds backwards until you hear the reasoning. Old, multi-year sea ice has pushed most of its salt out over time and melts into fresh water, while young ice hasn't and can't. Confusing the two in a landscape where dehydration and hypothermia could both kill you in the same afternoon wasn't a small mistake to make. There's a social layer to this too, one that shows up across cultures that otherwise share nothing in common. Many ancient legal and religious traditions, from early Islamic law to Jewish custom, recognized something scholars now call the right of thirst. If a person asked for water, you gave it, even to a stranger, even without payment. It wasn't just kindness. In a world where the difference between finding water and not finding it was the difference between living and dying, refusing a thirsty traveler wasn't just cruel. It was the kind of thing a community remembered about you. Not every group solved this problem. Where none of these techniques existed, or where a band was pushed into unfamiliar territory during a drought, waterborne illness and dehydration were straightforward, common causes of death, and some evidence suggests seasonal water scarcity shaped migration routes and even conflict as bands competed over the same shrinking sources. It's worth being honest here. This knowledge wasn't perfect, And it wasn't always right. Without any concept of microorganisms, water that looked and smelled completely fine could still carry something that wouldn't show symptoms for weeks. A source safe for years could turn dangerous overnight after a flood or a dead animal upstream, and nobody would know until people started getting sick. This was pattern recognition sharpened over thousands of years of trial and very real error, not certainty. So here's the strange part. You live with treatment plants, chlorine, and a tap you don't think twice about, and you probably assume that's the only thing standing between you and contaminated water. But some of that old instinct never actually left. You still glance at a glass of water before drinking it, checking clarity, checking for anything floating in it. The exact same gut check your ancestors ran 1,000 generations ago. Hikers still test a stream before refilling a bottle from it. And long before any of that, the very first known human-built water storage, cisterns cut into the ground in the Jordan Valley some 6,000 years ago, was really just the ostrich eggshell and the desert soakage, scaled up and set in stone. We didn't replace this system so much as we industrialized it and slowly forgot the reasoning underneath. Every "does this look safe to drink" glance, every filtered water bottle, every treatment plant running quietly in the background of a city nobody thinks about is still doing the same three things your ancestors did for nearly 300,000 years. Watch what else is drinking it, store it before you need it, and treat it before you trust it. Take away every pipe and every plant tomorrow, and most people wouldn't know where to start. But somewhere underneath all of it, the oldest instinct on Earth is still running, quietly, waiting to be needed again.